Wilderfeast is a tabletop RPG by Horrible Guild out of Italy. It's a sort of high fantasy world where you play as hunters who track down, kill, and lovingly prepare the meat of giant monsters. The phases of play and the character construction are very focused on these activities: tracking, killing, and cooking monsters. And the presentation and artwork are very evocative of a world inspired by an anime series that never was. In this video, I'm just going to be covering the 85-page quick start for Wilderfeast, as at the time of this recording, the game is crowdfunding on Kickstarter. I've left a link below for that. I also want to point out that I had the opportunity to interview the writer of Wilderfeast, Casey Shi. Our conversation was a lot of fun, and we unpacked a lot of the inspiration and the scope of this game. I also got to ask the head of RPGs at Horrible Guild, Federico Corbetta, about how his company, which has traditionally made really great board games, got into RPGs. The link to this written interview is also down below and was originally published through my newsletter. You should subscribe to my newsletter if you're into in-depth interviews with awesome RPG creators like these. I think I've done 10 or 12 at this point, and the stuff I'm getting from creators is just incredible every time. Okay, so here's the deal with the setting. In this world called the One Land, monsters have been around for millions of years. You play as a human called a wilder. Humans, you see, have only been around for a few thousand years. It's not clear where they came from, but they're here now and they have a society of their own. Your part in that society is as a monster hunter. But you aren't just killing and eating monsters indiscriminately. There is a magical virus-like curse going around called the Frenzy, which sends affected monsters into a frenzy. In order to contain this contagion, wilders like yourself go around tracking down the afflicted. And you also happen to cook and eat these monsters each time. And in case you're wondering, there's no danger of catching the frenzy curse yourself when eating the meat. There's a foolproof cleansing process, and we don't have to worry about that. You don't really get much explanation for what's causing the frenzy other than a passing mention of a global conglomerate called the Charter, which is both causing it somehow as well as pretending to fight the scourge. Your character is composed of a few relatively basic components, which I find to be a very attractive feature of the game. It's not brutally rules light or anything, but it is definitely lighter than average. You have 4 core stats, or styles: mighty, precise, swift, and tricky. These are rated from 1 to 5 for PCs, and that rating tells you how many D6s you can throw on a check that uses that style. I appreciate a lot of the little visual design decisions in this game so far, and that includes the fact that in the character sheet, your style rating is denoted by boxes, which just instantly tells you visually that those are D6s. Likewise, you have 12 skills, and they range from 0 to 3. Those are modifiers on any roll, and that's indicated by the plus sign here. So for example, on your turn during a monster battle, you want to hop onto the tallest rock you can get to and make a loud and distracting mating call. You might use the mighty style and the skill call. If you had a 3 in mighty and a 3 in call, that would be 3d6 plus 3 onto one or more of the dice results. A character also has traits, which each have a mechanical function and can themselves have levels of potency. Every character starts with the traits Grit and Insight, which are human-based characteristics, but in this game, your character is a wilder who takes on various monstrous powers and abilities from the monsters they eat. Those come in the form of additional traits. They also get a fairly structured 3-part background, described as 3 courses, which cover your upbringing, your initiation, and your ambition. You have 1 monstrance acquaintance, a described connection with one of your packmates, a signature spice, and signature staple food or ingredient. One of the most interesting things about characters in this game is the fact that you only track 2 kinds of gear. One is a special item called your tool. This is an oversized cooking utensil that you always carry around, which also doubles as your weapon. It's got its own durability point pool and a couple of unique techniques that you can use in battle. The other kind of gear that you keep track of is one we'll get to in a minute. Rolling a test works in 5 steps. First, as we mentioned a minute ago, you decide on the style and skill you're going to use for your turn. It can be any combination of the 4 styles and 12 skills. Then gather up the number of d6s you're afforded from your style. Step 3 is to choose your so-called action die. This is either a d8 or a d20. As a wilder, you can choose your human side and go with a D8, which is more consistent and reliable, or you can go wild and tap into one of your traits, which, if you recall, are for the most part your monstrous powers and abilities that you accumulate. If you go wild, then you would use a d20 as your action die. If you do this, you actually remove one of your d6 style dice from your pool and replace it with this d20. Then step 4 is to roll all the dice. If you have skill rating points to add, you add them to whichever dice you like. The 5th and final step is to check for successes. In this game, any modified result of 5 or more on a style die is a success. So you can roll anywhere from 0 to 5 successes, considering that you can only have 5 dice in a pool. But if you went wild and used a d20 for one of those dice and still failed the roll, you lose a point of harmony, which is a point pool shared amongst your pack. What's interesting here is that if you score even a single success, you now look at your action die, which is either a d8 or a d20. This is your action score. 1 through 4 is only a partial success, 5 through 7 is a regular success, and anything above 7 is a critical success. Multiple successes that you might have rolled up on your style dice can be spent on trait abilities. One thing I want to point out here is just how visually appealing and clear this quick start is. Check out how the dice resolution is illustrated on this page where everything is summed up. I asked Horrible Guild's Federico Corbetta about exactly how they were able to accomplish this, and his answer made a lot of sense. Those guys have been making board games for 10 years, so instructions and visually appealing presentation are their bread and butter. Advantage and disadvantage in this game is implemented as when you have advantage on a test, all modified 4s, 5s, and 6s on a style die are considered a success. When you have disadvantage, only modified 6s are a success. Here's a nice approach to a test failure where the GM is given some guidance on what kinds of things can happen. This list right here is actually just sound GM advice. Stamina is sort of like your hit points, but also represents psychological stress as well, and you have a max of 20. But if your character loses their first 20 stamina, they take on the condition of wounded, and their stamina fills back up to 20. Wounded is one of a number of conditions that you can take on, and it has levels. If you pick up a second level of wounded, you can't voluntarily spend stamina, and at wounded 3, you're either out for the scene or you can push yourself and the next damage you take will kill your character. I mentioned harmony a minute ago as being something you lose if you fail while going wild. Harmony is a shared point pool that starts at 3, and you can also lose it whenever a character uses one of their mutations to help a packmate. You gain back harmony each time the pack bonds over a meal, but also anytime the GM feels like the pack or players seem like they've earned a point. So I didn't quite mention this before, but the game is divided into 4 different phases of play, 3 of which are in a specific order. There's free play, but the ordered phases are the trail, where you travel through wilderness to track down a monster, the hunt, which is the battle phase, and the feast, where you cook the monster and share a meal together. The trail here has a lot of structure to it. Players complete travel rounds until they reach their destination, and they can essentially do one of 2 things each round. Either gather supplies, which calls for a forage roll and camping, which has the benefit of ending most conditions, or they can move on, which comes in the form of a challenge that has a target number calculated by distance and the size of the party. One player makes a navigation roll, while everyone else makes a clearing the bush roll. These are traversal rolls plus any style the player wants. If these rolls beat the target number established for this phase, they make it through the area but lose stamina. If they fail these rolls, they take damage but still make it to the next area. The hunt is the second of the 3 structured phases of the game, and it's where the pack encounters the creature. Kind of like video games like Shadow of the Colossus or Monster Hunter, your only combat is going to be centered around one large creature at a time, not a series of smaller encounters. Monsters in this game are composed of parts that each have a feature or ability, as well as durability ratings that can be whittled down and disabled. Distances in combat are simplified to basically being tiers relative to the monster itself, called strides. You can use this handy diagram along with some game pieces or icons to track PC distances from the monster. As far as turn economy, the monster can decide on each and every turn if they want a long turn, which is 3 actions in a row, or a short turn, 1 action after every Wilder's turn. Wilders get 3 actions per turn. I like the 3 actions per turn thing because it can give the players some tactical options. You can see from this table the different options you have in combat. As far as monster behavior, they tend to target only 1 Wilder per round and may occasionally change targets in the middle of a round. There's only 1 monster statted in the quick start, and I'll be curious to see if there are other exotic or interesting monster behaviors and tactics described for other monsters in the full game. The final phase in the Wilderfeast play cycle is the feast. Narratively speaking, the preparation of the monsters can take hours or days, but there's no mechanical element to this. These questions here sort of define the phase best. The pack discusses 1, how you're going to cook the monster, 2, what everyone is doing to prepare the meal, 3, what other things will be served, and most fascinating to me, how is this meal connected to their past, and the next time they eat this meal, what will they remember? These last 2 questions are so interesting to me because they drill deep into the roleplay aspect of the RPG experience with Wanderhome-like introspection. One other subtly brilliant bit is down here, where before digging into the meal, everyone in the pack says a phrase of thanks, something like grace or itadakimasu. This little detail gives the players a chance to create a shared culture if they want to lean in it at all. And that might have the effect of just creating a more profound and memorable play experience. So the tagline of this game, at least on the cover of the Quick Start, is "You are what you eat." And this right here is what they mean by that. When you defeat and then consume a monster, you get 1 level of any trait that they had. That's pretty much how you level up in this game, not by incrementally increasing your hit points or armor class, but by acquiring a variety of monstrous traits and abilities. Here's something I thought was pretty awesome. Quote, "The only items you track in this game are ingredients." That is a design choice that just puts laser focus on the theme of the game, which is hunting monsters and cooking them, while just cutting out all the banality of tracking adventure gear like rope and torches or whatever. It's really very clear about the prospect of not worrying about normal gear. Check this out. If you're worried about something like how to preserve extra meat on hand, you can just make up the fact that you're carrying a little portable Magitech freezer to store all your meat in. It's quantum inventory, where it sort of always exists and then comes into being when you need it. Here's an actual breakdown of the steps for cooking, as well as a very useful table on ways of cooking and describing the final dish. Most of these details have no mechanical bearing on the game. They're just here for the joy of RPing in a monster cooking RPG. It's sort of a given that you tend to enjoy food and cooking if you're going to play this game. Here are some cool fantasy recipes that really evoked my fond memories of Dungeon Meshi, an all-time classic manga by Ryoko Kui. I think in the Kickstarter there will be a stretch goal for a real recipe book that shows you how to make simulations of these dishes in real life. But either way, I was really impressed with the layout and especially the artwork on these pages. There's a whole sample scenario included in the Quick Start that I won't spoil for you here, but I do want to show you a couple things included in it. The first is that you get a taste of what an area stat block looks like. Each area has a hazard level, a distance rating, and the kinds of special ingredients that you can get if you choose to forage. The other thing worth noting is that even though there is only 1 monster statted for the adventure and the whole Quick Start, the level of detail on that monster is pretty extraordinary. It makes sense, since in any given gaming session, you're probably only going to have 1 encounter, so that monster ought to be pretty well described. But in any case, you actually get about 3 pages per monster. The Quick Start actually includes other monsters as well, but just their written descriptions and not their stat blocks. The Botabo is a giant bat-like thing that is constantly mutating with different features. And you got these 2 here. Actually, you can see just from the artwork that the kinds of monsters on offer are pretty wildly unique and creative. And the illustrations are just very evocative. The pre-generated characters at the end are great for getting a game started, and they give you a wide range of play experiences through the different traits that they come with. It's quite a ragtag bunch. All right, here are my thoughts on the Wilderfeast Quick Start. What is the end game? I'm left wondering what a character looks like after 5 or 10 hunts. I may have missed it, but I didn't see any rules on the limits on traits. So if your Wilder just kept succeeding at hunts, would you just keep accumulating monster traits until you had an unwieldy library of them to choose from in battle? No long campaigns. I think in that same vein, the tight focus on theme and play cycle might not lend this game to longer campaigns unless everyone at the table is focused on a compelling story rather than expanding their character abilities. I think a longer campaign would also have to include a unique monster combat every session in order to not get stale or redundant, and maybe even start branching out to fighting things other than monsters after a while. But again, the focus of the game is so much on hunting and preparing monsters as meals that I'm not sure you could comfortably have wilders fighting giant machines or anything like that. Utterly compelling presentation. Due to the fact that Horrible Guild cut their teeth on board game design, the layout choices in this Kickstarter are breathtaking compared to your run-of-the-mill RPG. Obviously, the art is pretty phenomenal. Everything from the character designs to the monsters to the hint of the world map and even the food. But the actual page elements like text boxes and page frames are just second to none. All the information is broken up, color-coded, and spaced out to make it as easy as possible to read, remember, and find later for reference. Focused theme. I find that RPGs which try to do everything end up doing none of it well. Wilderfeast has a very particular theme in mind, and every fiber of its being is focused on carrying out that theme through the play experience. All of your styles and skills pertain to tracking, fighting, and cooking monsters. There's no inventory to worry about except cooking ingredients. Your one weapon is a giant kitchen tool or another. It's all just a very polished concept with a very sharp edge that gets to the point of what it's trying to do. Living world. Maybe it's just me, but when I look at the artwork in this quick start and read the brief description of the fantasy world, I get this weird ghost sensation that this was based on some manga or anime. It's a neat feeling to have, but I really couldn't say for sure if the setting will be so fully described in the full game. But the author of this game, Casey Shi, is no amateur at this. She has written for Warhammer, Age of Sigmar Soulbound, Broken Weave, Beowulf, Age of Heroes, One More Quest, Uncaged, so I'm pretty confident the description of the setting of Wilderfeast will be pretty good. But we shall see. I've left a link down below to where you can find the Kickstarter for Wilderfeast, as well as the free quick start that I went over in this video. Also check out that really fun interview I had with KC and Federico discussing the inspiration and development of this game. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in this one and if you're backing it. Thanks as always for watching. See ya.